Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to see so many people come to kind of be part of the sharing of our project, the Creative ESOL project. Can everybody, just by a kind of show of gesture, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, great. Okay. So welcome to today's Creative ESOL Project Virtual Exhibition Tour with Q&A. My name's John Whall. I'm the Digital Participation Curator at Quad in Derby. We also host the Format International Photography Festival, which is what this event is part of today, but it's also part of a celebration of the ESOL project as a whole. And we'll talk more about that as we go through some slides before we go into the exhibition itself. And joining me today is Kajal.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Should I introduce myself now?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I am the ESOL coordinator for this project. I've been working on this project since September last year. My background is as a visual artist, but also as a socially engaged practitioner. So I've been working with communities for the last 16 years with my own company, but this is one of the first time I've actually had the opportunity to work on a long-term project like this. So I'm excited to talk to you about that.
Great, thank you, Kajal. So the project, the Creative ESOL project, like I said, was delivered, I want to say at Quad in Derby. It was more kind of via Quad in Derby because obviously the kind of pandemic and the situation that everyone around the world was in. I'm just having a little problem. Bear with me 1 second. I can't seem to get access to my notes. Okay, not to worry. And so, yeah, Quad is a centre for contemporary visual art, film and digital media. We're a cinema, we're a cafe, we're a workshop space, we're a community hub. And we work with artists like Kajal on numerous projects. Kajal was our digital participatory artist in resident a few years ago. And we come from a background of community and participatory arts. We were Q Arts more than 10 years ago now. So Quad has really kind of been able to establish itself within the kind of local and international communities around the world. We have exhibitions that range from digital exhibitions with VR and AR. We've got Warm Worlds and Otherwise by Anna Bunting Branch on the left there, which was a project around feminist identity and she used digital media as part of the research project, as well as participatory projects. We have the self-portrait open call exhibition on the right there. That was an open call to Derby residents to do a kind of small selfie in a way, but a kind of not in the sense of taking a camera and taking a selfie that way, but creating artwork. And we had over 300 submissions, I think, that were exhibited. It was a fantastic exhibition to see around the corridor spaces at Quad, because it really showed the community and the creativity of the communities around us. This is just a snapshot of the other communities that we work with. We work with families, children, young people, older people. We do deliver Minecraft. We do deliver digital as well as kind of design-based workshops. So there's a whole host of people that we work with at Quad. So moving on to the Creative ESOL project. The project was part of the ESOL for Integration Fund, which was a fund to help local authorities meet the English language needs of their communities. And that was through the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And it was funded, the funding was obtained by Derby City Council. So Derby City Council kind of coordinated the top end and the strategy around the project, and numerous arts and cultural organisations as well as support services around the city were brought together to deliver the project and engage with the ESOL participants. And that was funded. The funding was secured by Anna Mims to MBE on behalf of the council. And because it was a central government funded project, it had its complications in terms of who we could work with, how we could work with them, timeframes, etc. So, the funding was obtained really early on in the pandemic. It was about, well, the fund came about in about May. It was funded in July, and for those, especially in the UK, we were really kind of locked down, really restricted on how we could work with audiences and communities during that time. So to say it was a challenging project, I think, was a bit of an understatement. But you know, from every challenge, we have a lot to learn, and that's certainly what we've done. So I'm going to hand over to Kajal, who will take you through the process of the project. If anyone has any questions throughout, do pop them in chat. We are going to have a Q&A at the end. And I did say in chat, but I'm just going to say for clarity, this presentation is being recorded. If you're uncomfortable with that in any way, just turn your camera off. Okay, thank you. Kajal.
Okay, hi again, everyone. So as John just mentioned, it has been a challenging project from start to finish. Obviously, I was aware of that when I was employed to do the job, but it's not until you actually hit the ground running that you realize just what's involved. But obviously during a pandemic situation where we were expected to do everything online, and we've had I'm in Leicester as well, so we haven't actually left the pandemic at all, the lockdown at all. So this recruitment, which is usually done through leafleting and putting leaflets, so there's as part of a kind of methodology, I suppose, for socially engaged practice, you would go through a process of getting flyers done, distributing them to all the relevant places where people might be picking them up and passing by. We didn't really have the option to do any of those things, so really limited. So we did actually get the flyer translated into several languages, but it required me to actually go out on foot and actually flyer in public areas in a very busy kind of area in Derby, where most of they have a lot of new communities living there. So that was probably one of the most instrumental things. I mean, we actually only got one inquiry. We were there for at least like 2 or 3 hours, and we handed out probably about 500 leaflets, but we actually have one person come back to us through that process. And that was actually because I took a volunteer with me who spoke Kurdish. So the person that he met in Derby was also Kurdish. So it just goes to show, how difficult recruitment is. I mean, socially engaged practice, recruitment is the most difficult thing. As much as you have your own ideas about what you want to do, getting people on board is often the most challenging thing. So through that person that did actually pick up the leaflet, he became one of our community advocates. And through that channel, we were able to recruit more and more people one by one. On top of that, we also produced a crowdsourced video as well. So we put out a request for people in my own existing network through social media channels to submit material in different languages. So that we had a real strong focus on the digital kind of dissemination of the recruitment process. So that also ended up showing, bringing some people in. But again, through that process, we had a lot of people that were not in Derby. So one of the stipulations of the funding was that we were only allowed to work with people from Derby. So we had a lot of people answering that wanted to participate, they weren't in Derby. So it's always difficult to turn people away, but we found a way to include them anyway. So word of mouth had the most effect, I would say, in the recruitment drive.
Sorry.
Yeah, go on. John, were you going to say something?
No, I accidentally hit the slide forward. Sorry.
Do you want me to just roll through these slides now? Yeah, or do you want to? Yeah, okay. So through the delivery and planning of the project, again, it's very difficult. I mean, to actually have a very set idea of what you want to do in the sessions, because you just don't know who's going to be in the room, especially with the ESOL learners, because everybody was at a different level. So the first couple of sessions, we literally only had one person, and then every session there was like one more, and they were at very different levels as well. So initially we planned to have 3 sessions per week, which was quite ambitious, but we wanted to give people flexibility around their existing commitments. So that was the original plan, but then we ended up doing 2 sessions per week, and very organically we divided the learners up into beginner and intermediate. So there was an assessment that we had to do, but we very kind of, you know, we were very lenient about who goes into each group, and we invited all of the learners to come into each group just in case, you know, they felt they wanted extra practice, or, you know, we didn't want to assume that people were maybe more advanced than they were, or had less less skills than we thought as well. So we wanted people to feel welcome about, you know, their participation, and that went quite well. Obviously, some of the learners felt that the intermediate sessions were a little bit too advanced. In the intermediate sessions, we focused more on storytelling, and actually we had quite a few learners who had a background in theatre and the arts. So, you know, in the intermediate session, we were really able to have some very nice conversations and to develop their own personal skills. Okay. So yeah, in the sessions, we aim to enhance listening, speaking, reading and writing skills. And we originally had 3 phases to the project, which was cooking, storytelling through photography, film and writing. And the 3rd phase was supposed to have been around sculpture. And that was largely due to the residency that I did with Quad in 2017. But in the end, we only went with the cooking and the storytelling because at the time that we planned the project, we didn't know whether we were going to still be in lockdown, and the sculpture activity was a really successful one for us. So we wanted to do something that was quite engaging, and we also wanted to give a variety of activities, but obviously we didn't come out of lockdown, so we had to actually cancel the last activity of sculpture, and we just extended the storytelling into the last phase of the project. In addition to this, learners were assigned homework tasks as well. And so we found that people were quite keen to develop their skills outside of the class, and they were proactively asking for homework activities because a lot of the people were alone, so they wanted things to do. So that was quite nice to know that they were actually, you know, engaging with the project in that way. The type of content we were asking for was photography, video, audio, and the kind of material that they submitted were like cooking tutorials, a personal video essay, vlogs, and some short video clips as well. So there's a real diversity in the kind of material that people were submitting, and that for me expressed the diversity of the group as well.
It's important to kind of just highlight there, Kajal, because you've gone through the kind of process that we came to, but really early on the project was meant to be much bigger. And Kajal came to us in September. We'd had succession with funding around July. But the staff that at Quad that would normally be involved in learning and outreach and community projects were still furloughed up until August. So a lot of things had to change and had to adapt, and the delivery planning, we had a learning program planned, outlined before Kajal came on board, but what Kajal was able to do was really adapt to every single challenge that kept coming along in terms of delivery planning. The initial plan was to engage a lot more learners over longer periods with language cafes, gallery visits, film screenings, conversational aspects of watching film and media and going to the gallery, a lot of activity that was meant to surround the learning itself. So as much as we had targets to reach in terms of the number of learners, we also had additional targets in terms of the number of people that we involved outside of the kind of formalized learning, as well as kind of celebration events and activities. So really a lot of things kind of just dropped away because we were so restricted in terms of being out and about in public and physically being able to meet with learners. Organizations and communities we would normally approach were not available because of contact and communication kind of failed. There was a point where Quad opened in September, but I think we were open for like 2 weeks before we then had to shut again because of the second lockdown. You know, we weren't able to deliver a lot of the learning until nearly December, and the project finishes this month. So there was a lot of challenges that had to be overcome. And what Kajal was able to do was really kind of focus on that learner engagement for the learners that we were able to engage with. We're very aware that there are learners out there that we probably could have done a lot with. We were just not able to reach them, and that was either through communication or through the kind of digital poverty aspect of it. So the delivery and the planning changed a lot from July, August last year to even January, February this year. It had to keep changing because we were so in flux with everything that was happening around us.
Yeah, and exactly that. And I think being responsive to the changes as they happen around you, you just generally in this kind of within this discipline, it is very much about being responsive, you know, to what is happening in the room at the time. You know, each and every learner can completely shift the dynamics of what's happening in the room. But it was particularly within this pandemic situation, we just did not know what was going to happen from one session to the next. And of course, you know, we are very keen to deliver programs that are, you know, value driven. But the reality is that, you know, this funding was coming from central government. So, you know, we had obligations to fulfill, to meet as well. So there was this in the back of my mind, you know, there was this expectation that we have to meet these targets. And, you know, that, I mean, I wouldn't say it necessarily affected the learning, because we had a tutor that was actually doing the teaching elements of it. But I think that does definitely add a lot of pressure in terms of how to actually deliver a program like this, you know, because it is very much about getting as many people in as possible. Okay, so learner and participant engagement. We wanted to provide informal and flexible learning, you know, methods to the group. So we provided formal and informal learning activities, along with more structured and free-flowing and organic methods for learning as well. So we're trying to encourage something called behavioral learning, which is basically often with traditional forms of learning, it's a very much like a, you know, an old school method of the teacher is giving the information and the learner is receiving the information. So behavioral learning is very much about where the learner is actually bringing in existing forms of knowledge and their skills and expertise and aspects of themselves into the process of learning. So that was a really important part of the whole project. Just generally in socially engaged practice, that is a really important part of how learners can be empowered, and they feel like they're not just receiving information that we want to give them. It's also about how their existing knowledge can inform and shape the whole project and the outputs as well. So that was a really important part of the project. From, you know, every single submission that we received, we gave like a vague, you know, brief of what we were expecting, but on the whole, or everybody just submitted things that they really in their own way, you know, the types of material, you know, the kind of the subjects, everything. They were very kind of, you know, I think independent in terms of what they wanted to submit. So another thing is the way that learners were engaging with each other. So obviously we had people from many, many different parts of the world with many, many different languages as well. So we couldn't have a translator that spoke all of those languages. So often we would be relying on other learners to be translating instructions to other learners. So we did have a few common languages. Arabic was one of them. So we would often be asking John we would be asking the other learners to translate instructions to other learners. So that was a really successful part. I think, you know, it kind of in a way replicated the dynamics. So if you were in a live classroom, because there were just instructions that we just weren't able to give in English. So that was a really nice part of seeing learners actually having fun with each other and learning from each other, and you know, I think it was quite empowering for them as well, for some of the learners to actually be using their language, because some of our learners, they were able to speak 4 or 5 languages. So for them to actually feel like they've actually got something that others learners can benefit, and the project on the whole can benefit from, that was really nice. Okay, so communication, you know, how is it that possible to communicate with learners. Obviously, WhatsApp being the most, practical and sensible way for that to happen. So most of you probably know and do use WhatsApp already. So I'm just going to go through some of the pros of using WhatsApp. It's efficient, it's practical, and it's a trusted way to communicate with people that are engaging with the project. And by that, I mean that obviously a lot of the initial inquiries were coming through email, but well, not actually, no, I won't say a lot of them. Probably we had about a third of them were coming through email. But I intentionally did put my phone number on all of the publicity, and that I think was really instrumental in the recruitment, because when people add you on WhatsApp, obviously they can see your photograph, and there's something quite interpersonal about them being able to see your picture and to see who's actually there's a human being behind the leaflet, I suppose. So this kind of informal way of communicating was really important. And it helps to build trust very, very quickly. So we were using WhatsApp in different ways. We're using as a group. So there was a group, and we were using that for obviously just updates and homework tasks. And then obviously private messaging for speedy personal requests, questions and concerns. And like I said before, this was really good way for us to build trust and friendship through using emojis, GIFs, images, voice notes, but also formal documents during the sessions, because sometimes the learners weren't checking their emails. So, I would be behind the scenes as Mahira, teacher, was teaching the sessions, and I would have learners WhatsApping me saying I didn't receive the lesson plan, so I would just WhatsApp them the documents that they needed. So it was a really, it's just a brilliant way of communicating. Like I said, the emojis and everything, you can express emotion. I mean, just the way that you would talk to your friends, basically, using emojis just allows, I think, both parties to express feelings in a way that I think is lost through traditional email or written documents. So, really, WhatsApp allows us to understand individual needs and hopes and dreams for the future. So through these interactions, I was able to have very personal conversations with each and every one of the the learners, and through these conversations I felt I was able to understand a little bit about who they were, and then me as well. And it wasn't just about them learning English, it's about really trying to understand who they are as people and what their aspirations are for the future, and seeing if we could actually leverage this project to give them pathways into the kind of futures that they want, sort of career paths that they want. So, like I said, it allows expression of personal feelings and humor, which is often lost through other modes of communication. Sorry, I just to go back actually for that last slide. The cons of using WhatsApp is working longer hours, which I think that we have at least 3 of our learners here, and I think they'll probably agree that I don't mind at all doing those longer hours, because it's it's a pleasure for me to be communicating. I'm a people person, and I don't think you could do this kind of work if you're not a people person. So communication with learners would often be extended into evenings, nights and weekends, and this was no problem for me at all. But as a socially engaged person, or anybody aspiring to get into this kind of industry, this is terrain which not all employees or workers would be comfortable with. So that's a really important point for me to note, because WhatsApp was instrumental for the project there, but at the same time, not everybody would want to use this and go over and beyond their kind of working job description, let's say. Okay, next slide, please. So showcasing talents, again, as I was saying on the last slide, really understanding what it is that people are wanting to do beyond learning English, a kind of CPD, continuing professional development of learners, the ambitions for our, beyond the project, once everything is ended, is to really try to extend our communication and contact with everybody who's participated. One of the biggest downsides of having a project is that it ends and then you lose contact with everybody. So we wanted to ensure that there was a way for us to actually showcase talent. You know, obviously we were setting assignments to our learners, but then they were they were submitting work that was obviously very close to their own interests. So this particular picture was submitted by one of our learners called Mohammed, and he was from Iran. He's a father, and he was also a santoor player. He was in Iran. He was a tour guide, but he's also a very, very talented musician. And he was sending me quite a few different things, all of the things that he was doing in lockdown. So, you know, I think part of this role is really about trying to identify what it is that people are interested in and trying to give people platforms to develop those interests. Obviously, Mohammed, he's, you know, a middle-aged man, and he's having to start from scratch again. But in a way, I think, you know, maybe being here in a new country is giving him opportunities that maybe, you know, to do something completely different. So through this Showcasing Talent initiative, we wanted to provide a platform for Mohammed particularly to do something for our audiences. So on Monday, we actually had 2 sessions that were led by Mohammed. He did a live cooking session in English where he taught our audiences to make kofta. And also then he did a santoor performance in the afternoon. So that was really good, because obviously his English was quite limited, but obviously we were trying to give you know, him ways that he could just increase his confidence. So as part of the Showcasing Talent, we're doing 5 different activities. Those were the 2. So we've got different activities running to do that. So part of the reason we want to do these things is that we want to build on trust, and we want to build our relationships with the community, because traditionally Quad doesn't have as much contact with new communities as we would like. Some of the other recipients of the funding, they probably have more contact with the kind of communities that we were expected to work with on this project. So we want to kind of build these links into the community, and we want to maintain these contacts and develop closer links. And we want to also continue working with the community advocates who have been really, really helpful to us as well. And next slide, please. So some of the challenges that we've had are numerous challenges, but just to summarize, digital poverty. So some of, obviously, if we were doing this in, you know, in the actual building, then, you know, we would be giving laptops and all kinds of equipment. I mean, that has its restrictions as well when we are giving laptops, because then they're restricted to doing the activities in class time. But obviously they were using their own equipment. And because a lot of our learners were from, you know, maybe they were using old equipment, which were overheating and sometimes switching off completely. So that was a big issue. Obviously, internet being really intermittent as well during sessions. That was also a bit of a problem. The timescale that we were given to do this project, we were only given 6 months, which really isn't enough time at all. Ideally, a project like this would require at least a year to experiment, to test things out, but then to build on the relationships, and then to really cultivate that learning in a more kind of in-depth way. But the timescale, particularly during the lockdown conditions, everything takes twice as long. So we couldn't reach as many learners as we normally would have had. And we had to employ more innovative methods of delivery and contact. So yeah, more time was required to build those connections. The paperwork, central government funded projects. I mean, again, I think I've been quite spoiled as a freelance, you know, artist doing these projects for so long. The paperwork was really, it was never ending. So it took between 1.5 hours to 2.5 hours to enroll, assess, and survey each person. So many learners were difficult to pin down due to their personal and professional commitments. Under COVID, many people found themselves under financial difficulties when we're trying to find work. So our 3 community advocates, they're actually professional hairdressers, but under COVID, they found themselves retraining as bus drivers and forklift drivers. So, you know, originally we really wanted, and we had a budget to pay them as well. So we wanted to really make them an active part of the project, but obviously because of their, very real kind of difficulties, they weren't able to put in as much time into the project as we would have liked them to have done. So navigating online learning also presented a challenge, as like I said, the internet connections weren't always stable and learning was often disrupted. So I'd say these are the most common kind of challenges I think anybody who's delivering online learning. We try to get around most things, but yeah, I'd say that was the most challenging thing.
It just to kind of add to that, Kajal, as well, because it was a challenge for us as an organization. We are a digitally focused organization where we feel that we're equipped to engage audiences digitally, but being pushed to do this remotely really stretched us and really challenged us. The plan initially was to have the learning to happen at quads, with additional kind of time for machines for learners to kind of use our equipment and use our resources, but we weren't able to do that because of the nature of the lockdown, the nature of the building that we had to shut completely. So that really put us under pressure to kind of think about new ways of working. And Kajal, you mentioned we had 6 months. We had a bit longer. It was only really around October that we could really get going with it. And like I said, and then as we started to get going, we hit the second lockdown and all of our plans got changed. So in terms of challenges, that's been really challenging for us to constantly have to adapt, to constantly have to reassess how best to do something. Every solution kind of was a problem solver for about a week, and then a new challenge came in that we couldn't use that solution, and we constantly had to adapt. So it's quite difficult, but like I said before, with every challenge there becomes an opportunity to learn, and we've certainly learned from this, and certainly moving forwards we kind of have a better understanding about how we would tackle a project like this in the circumstances, hopefully never in the same circumstances again, but it really opened our eyes in terms of how we look to adapt our abilities and adapt our processes with engaging new audiences.
Absolutely. Yeah, go on, sorry.
That's fine.
We'll go back to it because I had those case studies, and 2 of the people in the case studies are actually here with us, so it'll be really interesting to bring them in a second. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, lastly, I think for me, about something we call process over product. So often, it usually stands that, in these funded kind of applications, we're putting these bids forward, and really funders want to see something. They want to see something tangible. What did you make? And so as part of this bid, we had promised that we were going to produce digital outputs, in the form of films, which obviously we didn't know at the time. We were anticipating having projections on buildings, and obviously because we have the Format Festival, this would have been, it was intended to be showcased in the physical space at the Format Festival. Obviously none of that could happen. So obviously that was always problematic going into the project anyway, because as socially engaged artists, we're trying to really value the process over the product. The product is a byproduct of the project, and it's just something extra. So what we really want to do is to value what happens in the project, and that for us is the most valuable thing. What kind of learning is happening, how is it that we're doing all of the above, building relationships and providing opportunities, and what learning is happening. Is there, is social justice is happening? Are people able to use this kind of process to advocate for better human rights and social justice, even if it means just accessing basic needs and services? So these are the kinds of things that I think as an artist I'm very keen to be doing. But obviously when we are trying to deliver a funded project, then it does often become we are driven to make sure that the funders are getting what we promised them we were going to give. But at the same time, the process is still really, really important to us. if not more important, you know. So we've tried to reflect that in the exhibition. We want to show this. We want to demonstrate learning. How did learning happen? You know, where it happened, and we also want this to be an educational process as well. You know, when we're showing how we did things in the exhibition, what we've tried to show, this slide here is actually in the exhibition. You'll see this in a second during the tour. We're trying to demonstrate how learning was actually happening. So, you know, that was definitely an opportunity in this pandemic situation, being able to show how that learning happened, because usually when we do the exhibitions, it's really, really hard to show how that learning happened. You know, documenting learning and, you know, measuring success, they call it. It's really hard to do. The best you can do is basically photographs, film, commission a film. You know, we've done all of the above, but it's really, really hard to actually show those interactions, you know, those really special moments where you can actually see something really magical happening in the group. And that's really, really hard to show. So the fact that we had over 30 hours of recorded material, and there's you know, there's little clips where you literally can't see anybody's face, but people are laughing and there's a dynamic with it. And none of these people have met each other before. And when you can actually share humor across this digital platform, it's really, really special. So yeah, for me, that was the highlight, you know, just having the opportunity to actually share that with other people and being able to show it.
So we're going to go into kind of showing you the exhibition shortly, but we just wanted to highlight some next steps of where we're thinking of going moving forwards. As Kajal kind of said, working with central government funded projects, we're restricted with time, and this project has to end on the 31st of March. We can't do anything about that. But what we can do is look at future. And this week and next week is part of a celebration event of activities. What should have happened was a physical event where we showed films, seen the exhibition. We were planning pop-up cafes and food and community events, which we couldn't do. So next Friday, we will be premiering on YouTube a film of all the content that's been created and some of the work that you'll see in the exhibition, as well as other community events that are happening and taking place as part of the kind of the celebration of the ESOL project. What this project has done as well is it's allowed us to look more in terms of joint working amongst other Derby cultural organisations. I think there was about 5 or 6 other organisations involved from the cultural perspective, and we didn't really get to talk to each other properly until the beginning of this year, and there was a lot of learning just in a few conversations about what people were doing, how they were doing it. And everyone had this desire to do more with this audience and work with an audience where we're not as restricted. You know, we couldn't work with certain participants because of their status as a refugee or asylum seeker, or however that kind of came about. It was really problematic, and what we wanted to focus on is supporting those whose English was a second language. So we are looking at ways of working moving forwards. Quad itself, I really want Quad to be a place where ESOL communities can come together and be creative and socially engaged. That was one of the things that I got excited about with this project, is Quad being a place where all communities, diverse communities, local communities can come together and find a place where they can be creative. And the more diverse communities around the city are those that we're less engaged with. We're aware of that, and we want to do better, and we want to do more around that. We have identified some funding to continue working with the ESOL community, but from a perspective of developing participatory practice with diverse communities as well as diverse practitioners. So we're just in the process of looking at how best we can put that together. And the format exhibition, which we'll go into shortly, is being hosted for a minimum of 12 months, and that's just to kind of server costs. It is something ideally we'd want online forever, but those coming to the exhibition will be able to do so and look at it for the next year. So that's really encouraging. So there's a kind of legacy there. So we're going to go into the exhibition.
Can I just add something before we go into the exhibition, John?
Yeah.
Just adding to what John just said about all the different organisations that receive the money. I mean, through, you know, halfway during the project, John suggested that we start to speak to the other organization, which was actually obviously a really important thing for us to have done, because we wanted to understand what other organizations were struggling with. So through that process, we really learned a lot. How is it that these other organizations were, meeting their targets? Was there any flexibility? And then through this process of knowledge exchange that was happening, we realized that everybody was working to different parameters. So, the reason I'm raising this is because obviously we didn't have very long to do the project, and in hindsight, we feel that a different approach, I feel that a different approach would have been a lot more kind of effective, if we'd had a more strategic approach with all of the organizations working together to roll out a program where we weren't competing for learners, because Derby's not that huge, and the audience that we were trying to reach isn't that huge. So we were trying to understand what is the best way to engage different people, and offer the best of what we're trying to do as an organization. Obviously our specialism at Quad is digital, and we had other organizations like the Derby Theatre and the other organization that was specializing in music or visual art. And obviously we have a lot of people that were coming to us that were interested in different things. So in hindsight, ideally what we would like to have done is offered a program that ran over maybe however long, 6 months, 4 months, and offered a series of activities where people could experiment and try out different things. And that would have been a much more, I think, effective use of resources, time as well, instead of us all trying to recruit and basically scrambling for all these learners. So yeah, and again, because it was central government funded, there are very complicated kind of things around whether or not you're allowed to count the same learner twice, whereas if we'd had this strategic kind of voice, collective voice, what would have been really nice for us to have said is that, how we can measure success of the project to see how many people engage with us from the beginning and stayed with us to the end. And so I feel that's a much more nuanced way of evaluating the project, rather than just saying, hey, we had this many people, because qualitative information is a lot more difficult to assess. But I just feel that a more strategic and collaborative voice would have been nice from the outset.
Yeah.
It's fortunate that we had to instigate that kind of inquiry.
Yeah, I think one thing that was really reassuring when we had those conversations with the other cultural partners is our project was one of the largest projects within the kind of the whole ESOL for integration project. But even those who were doing really small projects compared to ours were having the same struggles and the same issues. So that was really something that kind of gave us a sigh of relief, because we felt we were really struggling. But to hear that other organizations were in the same boat was really really helpful, supportive, and even in an indirect way. So
one last point on that, but also learning from the existing research that exists about what kind of art forms are actually most effective in ESOL language learning. Theatre, it turns out, and something called process drama is a really effective way for people to actually engage in learning English or other languages. And we weren't made aware of that. There were some really interesting research articles that were written as part of a green paper when this ESOL for Integration Fund was announced. And, we didn't have access, it's only because I'm writing a paper on this at the moment that I came across these articles. But that would have been really valuable information for us in the beginning, because we could have actually collaborated with Derby Theatre from the beginning and says, okay, how can we use drama to facilitate learning in a more effective way? There's something about, embodied kind of knowledge and the way that people receive and have the confidence to give out, to be in a group through drama that maybe isn't as effective in other art forms. And that is really important knowledge.
Thanks, Kajal. So I'm going to switch to another machine just to share what we're going to do now. Is we're just going to have a little brief walk through the exhibition, and then I'll drop a link into chat so you can go and have a look yourself. So we just wanted to talk you through. I've left myself in a place. There you go. The exhibition itself. just quite briefly, and then we'll give you an opportunity to go in and have a look yourself. When you do go and have a look in yourself, it can be quite demanding on machines. So if you want to drop out of Zoom for 5 minutes and have a look around and then come back into the Zoom, that's perfectly fine. And then we'll follow up with a Q&A afterwards. So the exhibition space itself is actually shared. It's in this lovely dome structure with the University of Derby and the Format Graduate Award. And so there's some academic work in here as well. But we have a great space in here. And the idea of the space when we were curating it was the idea of it being these hidden lives beyond this wall, lives that we don't generally see or hear about. And so we wanted to kind of give that voice. So we have a great introduction by Leslie, who is kind of with us today as a participant in this Zoom, just introducing the space. And then Kajal, do you want to talk us through the works as we go through?
Yes, okay. So right there in front of you is, again, one of our learners who's with us today, Aslan. He's a journalist from Chechnya, and he obviously had a lot of skills already, storytelling skills, and, you know, he just hit the ground running. He knew exactly what needed to be done, and it was great because he had a lot of existing material that he'd been, you know, he'd been already just shooting his, you know, diaries and things like that, so he was able to use a lot of the content that he already have. But the story was just really just lovely. It was very evocative, and, you know, he added a Wordsworth poem in, and again, you know, some of the content that people produced, you know, acted as a stimulus for some of the lessons as well, so that was really nice. Okay,
there's just a slight delay as I turn my head digitally.
Okay, so again, like I said, we wanted to feature some of the process, and so we've included, you know, bits of the interaction. And this is conversations that I was having with Leslie on WhatsApp, and, you know, they're just, for me, they were really heartwarming moments that kind of show, you know, how this knowledge exchange was actually happening, and these homework tasks that were being requested and submitted. So yeah, you can just see those in a second when you go through. And then Leslie, you know, his English is really excellent. So, and I kept telling him, you don't really need me at all. But again, it was just a case of trying to understand, you know, what can I do for somebody like Leslie, who's clearly, you know, very proficient with the language, and, you know, what is it can I do? So there were just moments where I think we were having this banter through WhatsApp, and, you know, I was like just, you know, telling him to go out and shoot video, and so that's what he did. And it was just, you know, he was just sending me these really like these charming and endearing videos that kind of gave me and just give anyone a real insight into his personality and character. And, you know, obviously I think Leslie's content, particularly for me, was just lovely, because it shatters all the stereotypes that we have about, you know, people who have moved to this country. You know, it really shows kind of how, you know, he's you know, some of the kind of humor in that video, how he's playing on kind of English slang and things like that. I think it was just, yeah, it's just, you have to watch it. It's really nice. So again, you can just see those interactions with Leslie in the video, and yeah, that's that. This is some work by a lady called Elena. She's a middle-aged lady from Russia, and she was mostly submitting text material and bits of video here and there. She's a very keen gardener. So again, you know, I think a lot of the time people feel like they need to submit really polished content, but we just wanted to show anything really that, you know, made them happy. So that was the first assignment. We were asking people to submit content about what makes them happy, and so they were literally just videos that were shot on her phone. And this is an extension of Elena's poem, so text. So she wrote a homework assignment. So this is about a 7-minute video. And, you know, again, please, if you do go and visit this exhibition, please stick with it, because this is, for me, I'm trying to, you know, I tried to demonstrate where the learning was happening, how the learning was happening, and the humour that was happening as well. So it's quite you know, it shows all of those things and those interactions that I was talking about earlier.
The way that we've designed this as well is so when you go in, you can't hear the audio at the moment, but you're hearing the conversation audio from the video behind over this video here, as well as the audio from the video Elena's created. So you get this kind of nice immersiveness of the kind of what she's saying, the spaces she's showing you, as well as the conversations about how the story was unfolding in terms of the level of detail in English.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Mohammed.
Yeah, so this is Mohammed Reza. He's the person I mentioned earlier, the tour guide. And so he's just a multi-talented person. You know, obviously he's a really talented player of the santoor, which is a traditional Iranian instrument. And he also was submitting lots of information about his cooking recipes. So he actually joined us after the cooking component was finished, so he had no idea that we'd been doing cooking, but he just submitted this video, these short clips of him making kofta, which is, you know, I was like, this is perfect, this is, you know, just the kind of thing that we were looking for. And through this submission is when we decided that, okay, we would really like to showcase, you know, some of this talent and see if we could share that with the Derby audience. So that's the event that we did on Monday. It's recorded, so if anybody wants to learn how to make kofta, it's all online.
Yeah, when you go into the event, if you do click on the videos themselves, there's a link to take you to that live recording on Facebook. The same with his music performance as well, so you'll be able to experience those also. So I'm just going to stop sharing this here and give everyone an opportunity, say 5 minutes, to go and have a look at the exhibition themselves. I put the link there in the chat. Again, if it's becoming too much in terms of your computer use, you can come out of Zoom and just come back in 5 minutes. The system itself, New Art City, which is hosting the exhibition, works really well on mobile phones if you do want to have a chat, check it out on phone instead. But we'll have 5 minutes and then we'll come back and we'll have a Q&A before we finish up. Okay, thank you. So does anyone have any questions for us?
I wanted to ask how many people you engaged with altogether with the challenges you had of recruiting people. How many did you manage to reach?
At the moment, we don't have a final number. So in terms of learners, we had 22 learners, and each had various levels of engagement. Our target initially was 60, as well as 500 taking part in community events and activities. So we're not sure about the community events and activities yet, because that's happening this week. Although I think we had over 600 people at the Format Festival launch last week. Still unsure about how many actually went into room 19, the ESOL room. So we're still kind of pulling that together. But in terms of learners, there were 22. There were some more in terms of engaged outside of that learning activity. It's just we can't count them because of the demographics that we need to work with. So those who are really supportive, like Kajal said earlier, some community advocates that were really instrumental about getting to those learners, that just not countable in terms of the project.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? That I know we still have 2 of the participants involved in the project in the Zoom. I'm not sure if they can hear us. I wondered if they had any questions, or if anyone else had any questions. Oh, sorry, Ingrid, you're muted.
I would be very happy to hear from some participants if any of them are keen to speak, because they are, you know, they are the ones behind everything, and we haven't heard from them, and it would be lovely. But no, you're not forced to.
No. Leslie, I can see that you've put your camera on. Are you happy to talk about your experience?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I don't really know what to say exactly, but what I can say is that it was an amazing experience, really, since day one. Even though my English is good and proper, but I'm always the kind of person that always thinks that there's always room for improvement. So during the quad classes, we kind of learned a lot of things, and then we got to mingle with a lot of people, and then the personal interactions with Kajal really helped a lot, because not only were we talking about things on the class level, we also spoke about future aspirations, what you want to study, what you want to do, everything, how you are feeling, how you are doing today, how you are feeling tomorrow, and stuff like that. So, overall, I would say it was a very good experience that I'm very grateful for. And I would like to thank Sue, because I saw she's also here, for sending me the link to be part of the quad classes. Yeah, so I'm really grateful.
Nice. So what do you want to do in the future then?
In the future, I'm still deciding, because Kajal sees a lot of potential in me. So I'm still, initially I always wanted, I choose two choices that I struggled to choose. I always wanted either veterinary or medicine.
Wow.
For part-time, I wanted to do either modeling or presenting and stuff like that. So yeah, and photography. So me and Kajal are still working on the part-time stuff and still deciding on the full-time part.
Nice. Great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Leslie, had you engaged much with filming and speaking to camera before the project?
No, I've not. I don't, it's okay. I'm not really engaged in it, but I think for me personally, being in front of the camera is just something that comes naturally. It's just something that comes up when I look at myself in the camera, and I just, I just get to have that kind of aura, or that kind of feeling, or yeah, or sensation of just, letting loose, just enjoying it and stuff like that.
Great.
I think you can really see that in Leslie's video. And, when he was sending me, I mean, I was, it was just a suggestion. It was like, Leslie, just go out, shoot some video, show me that you've been out, and he sent me back this amazing material. And it was like, you are so natural in front of the camera, like he just had this, he was just a free spirit, and he was totally unapologetic about who he was. And just, some people just exude this kind of charisma and confidence. And I really felt that, it made me smile just watching it. And I thought, this is the kind of person that I can see presenting his own TV show. So I don't know. I know from, I think, again, just generally the barriers to access that exist within, the arts is a real thing. And this is something that I've experienced, and it took somebody outside of my family to say to me that these are the things that you're good at. So, for me, my role isn't just facilitating English, it's also to just hold a mirror up to people to say, these are the things that I've noticed that you're really good at,
Yeah. And then just to add on to that, the thing is with me, from where I come from, somewhere, somehow, you always had a fear of something, especially for me, but I'm not going to get into that whole personal life thing. But, and then the fact that I'm here now, and I can literally be anything that I want, I can literally reach any goal that I want, is just absolutely amazing. And I'm just here to kind of seize the opportunity and just, grab the bull by the horns and just, become anything and everything that I can be, and do the most with my life.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, reflecting on the video that Leslie, that you sent me, it was raw, it was uncut. So we had this different types of material coming in. We had Aslan, who's obviously, trained journalist, and his storytelling style was very different, to Leslie. And Leslie's was just raw, uncut. It was just him speaking off the cut into the camera, unfiltered. And I think it was just, for me, that was a really so, you know, we're all conscious to some degree, you know, like even now I'm feeling a little bit conscious about the words that are coming out of my mouth, but the way, I think, Leslie, you were so free with the way that you were engaging with the camera. I think that's, for me, that's quite rare to see, you know.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, let me just behave and not be dramatic. Yeah. I don't, there's something about the camera, you know, when I look at myself in the mirror and then I look myself like in the phone's camera, it's not the same. So when I look myself here, I look more handsome. So I have this kind of confidence in me, like, yeah, you are the boy, you can do it. You just, you know, go with the flow. So I just enjoy myself.
Yeah, I would love to see you on TV. Not that I watch TV, but, you know, I'd just love to see that.
Yeah, I'll try to look into that whole acting thing and presenting and everything. Yeah.
That means I have to start watching TV.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
No, I'm just, because you said if we had any question, but actually I just had a thought on how maybe at some point we could link the participants from both projects. I mean, that's another project, of course, but and sharing experiences from London and from Derby as ESOL learners, or I don't know. I just feel like there could be some great learning in being in different places in the UK.
Absolutely, and we're looking at the possibilities of doing more work moving forwards, whether that's with or without central government funding. You know, there's pros and cons there. So we're just kind of looking at the best way to do that. But certainly that's an area of work that Quad would like to take forward.
I mean, I don't know if we've got time, but Aslan is also here, one of our participants. So would it be okay to just bring him in quickly? Aslan, if you're still there?
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Aslan.
Hi. My name is Aslan. Surname Dadaev. I am from Chechnya. Journalist. Sorry, my language, but I try. I am try. I have been living in the UK for a year and 3 months. It so happened that I arrived here at the very beginning of the lockdown. Yeah, and we didn't have the opportunity to attend the language classes, and this went on for a long time. Therefore, first of all, I want to say thanks to Kajal and Mahira and everyone who created this project. I attend 2 more language training classes now, but this course this course was the most productive for me because of the hands-on exercise. We practiced text assessment and error correction. This was especially helpful when we were describing the process of cooking or a story about our life in Great Britain and your last life in your country.
That's really nice to hear. You know, obviously, I think, you know, as someone who, you know, even Mahira, the teacher, you know, she's still a student, so she has taught English before, but as a creative organization, what we try to do is provide different ways of learning. So it may not be what people are getting through a formal ESOL course, which has the structure. But, you know, again, it's this kind of more behavioral, organic kind of informal learning that we're really trying to develop. So yeah, it's really, really nice and encouraging to hear where people just have a little bit more fun and, you know, yeah, find different ways to tell stories. That's all I have to say. Thank you for everyone for listening.
Great. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. I will send the Zoom recording out to everyone by email who came through Eventbrite. So I'll send that out later in the week. If you do want to know more about the project or want to get in touch, my email address is johnw@derbyquad.co.uk, and I'll put that in the chat just so you can copy it. Kajal will be finishing with us with the project at the end of the month, but we are looking to take things forward in however we can over the next year or so. And yes, thank you for our participants for joining us today and speaking. You know, that's a really important thing to recognise, that you've spoken to people in English over a conference call like this, which is really fantastic. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope to see and hear from you all soon, and do drop me a line if you want to get in touch. Are we allowed to share recording with colleagues? Unless someone has said otherwise, I don't see why not. Okay, great, thank you.
Brilliant.